The morning air was sharp, cool, and heavy with the scent of pine. Sunlight spilled through the forest canopy, glinting off the hood of my truck parked by the gravel driveway. It was the kind of quiet morning most people would kill for, but I had no idea it was about to turn into the loudest day of my life. My name's Daniel Carter, and until that morning, I thought I'd left conflict behind in the courtroom. Out here, on the edge of Evergreen County, I'd found peace, or at least I thought I had. My golden retriever, Max, bounded across the yard, tail wagging, chasing a butterfly through the tall grass. I stood on the porch of my newly built log cabin, coffee in hand, admiring the view, the kind of view that makes you forget the world is complicated. That's when I saw her, a flash of floral fabric, the echo of determined footsteps. Nancy Miller, the president of the Brookfield Homeowners Association, marching down my driveway like she owned the ground beneath her. Her heels crunched the gravel with militant precision, clipboard clutched to her chest like a badge of honor. Behind her, 2 other HOA board members trailed, whispering, nodding, following their queen bee into battle. I didn't move. I'd seen this kind of arrogance before, just never in a sundress. "Good morning, Nancy," I called out, my voice even. "You're up early." "Mr. Carter," she said, with that rehearsed smile of superiority. "I'm afraid we have a serious issue." I took a sip of my coffee. "Do tell." She flipped through her clipboard dramatically, papers fluttering like courtroom exhibits. "According to Section 4.3b of the Brookfield HOA Code, your property is currently non-compliant with several community guidelines. You failed to submit an architectural approval request for your driveway. Your exterior wood stain is darker than the approved color range, and..." She glanced over my shoulder at Max. "You have a pet on the premises that's not registered." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean my dog?" She didn't blink. "Yes, and since your property remains unapproved, technically, you're trespassing on HOA-managed land." For a moment, I thought she was joking. Then I realized she wasn't. I let the silence hang there for a few seconds, the wind brushing through the pine needles above us. "You're saying I'm trespassing on my own land?" "That's correct," she said firmly. "You've been warned several times in writing." I smiled, small but sharp. "You mean those letters where you recommend I pay fines for choosing the wrong porch light?" She stiffened. "Rules exist for a reason, Mr. Carter. The HOA ensures harmony, structure, order." I stepped off the porch, coffee still in hand, Max trotting beside me. "Order," I repeated, my tone cool. "That's one word for it." Nancy folded her arms, clearly interpreting my calm as defiance. "If you don't leave this property until you've complied with our code, I'll have no choice but to escalate this." I stared at her, the morning sunlight catching the edge of her oversized sunglasses. "Nancy, I own this property outright. I have the deed, the county paperwork, and a lifetime of experience reading legal fine print. You might want to rethink your next step." Her lips tightened into a thin line. "You'll regret that," she said softly, turning away. "You'll see." And just like that, she pulled out her phone. 5 minutes later, I heard it. The low, distant wail of sirens. They grew louder, cutting through the forest calm until 4 police cars rolled into my driveway in formation, gravel spraying under their tires. Blue and red lights flashed across the wood siding of my cabin. 6 uniformed officers stepped out, hands resting on their belts, expressions alert but uncertain. Nancy met them with a wave like she was greeting her private security force. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," she shouted dramatically. "That man," she pointed at me, arm rigid, "is trespassing on HOA property. He's refusing to vacate." One of the officers, tall and steady with graying hair, approached me cautiously. "Sir, can I get your name, please?" "Daniel Carter," I replied calmly, handing him my ID. "Before we go any further, you might want to confirm ownership with the county database. It's public record." Nancy jumped in, her voice sharp. "We've already verified. He's violating multiple HOA bylaws. He's got an illegal structure, an unapproved driveway, and that animal." "Ma'am," the officer interrupted, Please step back. Her mouth opened in disbelief. I beg your pardon. He raised a hand. We'll handle this. The other officers spread out, glancing between me, the cabin, and the clipboard-wielding hurricane of indignation behind them. Max sat at my feet, panting happily, tail thumping against the grass as if none of this concerned him. After a few moments of radio chatter, the lead officer's radio crackled. Dispatch confirms property ownership. Registered to Daniel Carter. Full deed. No encumbrances. The officer nodded, turning to Nancy. Ma'am, this land belongs to Mr. Carter. HOA bylaws don't supersede property deeds. This isn't a police matter. Her face flushed crimson. You don't understand. He's in violation of. With respect, the officer said, voice firm now. Violation of HOA rules isn't a criminal offense. You need to handle this through civil channels. For the first time, I saw uncertainty in her eyes. The realization that her authority didn't extend past the property line. But she was too proud to back down. This isn't over, she hissed, stepping toward me. You think you're untouchable? You'll see how far our reach goes. I took a slow sip of coffee, eyes locked on hers. You'll find mine goes a little farther. The tension broke when Max barked once, tail wagging, as if to mock the absurdity. The officers exchanged looks, half amused, half exasperated, before heading back to their cars. One of them nodded respectfully at me. Sorry for the trouble, sir. Enjoy your morning. When the last car disappeared down the road, the sound of gravel crunching fading into the trees, I exhaled slowly. The adrenaline had been hiding under the surface, masked by my calm exterior, but now it hit me hard. My peaceful retreat had just turned into a battleground. Nancy and her HOA soldiers retreated like a defeated army, their perfect suburban order shaken. But I knew this wasn't over. People like Nancy don't lose gracefully. They regroup, replan, and strike harder next time. And I wasn't just any homeowner. I was Judge Daniel Carter, District Court of Evergreen County. The same jurisdiction where the Brookfield HOA had been quietly expanding its control, fining residents into submission and manipulating county policies to protect itself. And on my desk back at the courthouse sat a thick case file I hadn't yet touched. Brookfield Homeowners Association versus County of Evergreen. Their name, their arrogance, their paperwork, all heading straight for my courtroom. The irony was almost poetic. That night, I sat on my porch again, the stars sharp and endless above the treeline. Max rested his head on my knee while I flipped through the thick stack of HOA notices Nancy had sent me over the past month. Every one of them was another nail in their coffin, each fine, each threat, each fabricated rule. I wasn't angry. I was methodical, patient, calculating, because the HOA didn't just pick a fight with a homeowner. They picked a fight with a judge. And when the time came, I wouldn't need to shout or threaten or call the police. I just need one thing, the truth. And the law was very much on my side. I looked down at Max, who had fallen asleep beside me, then up at the dark silhouette of Nancy's house across the trees. Her porch light flickered on, faint and distant, like a warning. I smiled to myself, whispering softly, "You wanted a fight, Nancy? You just filed it in the wrong court." The wind rustled through the pine trees, carrying away the sound of my voice. The forest stood silent, unaware it had just witnessed the first act of a quiet war. One that wouldn't be fought with shouting, but with evidence, patience, and a gavel strike that would echo far louder than any siren. Because some battles aren't about who yells the loudest. They're about who knows the rules better. And I wrote them. 2 mornings passed without a sign of Nancy or her entourage. But peace in Brookfield was never meant to last. The silence that lingered over the neighborhood wasn't comfort. It was calculation. I'd seen that kind of calm before in courtrooms, right before the guilty tried to strike again. On the 3rd morning, my mailbox held the first warning shot. A glossy cream envelope, gold embossed with the letters BHOA. Inside were 3 violations: unauthorized gravel driveway expansion, non-compliant with tone, and, absurdly, improper pet conduct, barking before 8 a.m. I laughed under my breath. Max, sprawled lazily across the porch, lifted his head as if he knew he was the accused. His tail thumped once against the wood. I pinned the notice on my wall, joining a growing collage of evidence. Not anger, not revenge, just facts. I'd learned long ago that arrogance always documents itself. And this HOA was writing me a full confession in slow motion. I began collecting everything. Every letter, every fine, every whisper of control disguised as community management. They thought they were tightening the noose. What they didn't realize was that I was handing them the rope. That afternoon, I sent a formal request for the HOA's financial records and meeting minutes. By law, as a homeowner, I had the right to see how my dues were used. 2 days later, Nancy showed up at my doorstep again. She didn't knock this time, just slid a sealed envelope under the door. It read, "Request denied. Only members in good standing may access board documentation." It was exactly what I wanted. The denial itself was illegal. They had violated state transparency laws, the very statutes I had once cited from the bench in cases just like this. I smiled faintly, filed it away, and labeled it Exhibit A. The deeper I looked, the darker it became. Several neighbors began reaching out quietly, telling their stories. An elderly couple fined for growing tomatoes. A young mother threatened with foreclosure for leaving a toy bicycle outside overnight. One man told me how the HOA forced him to repaint his home twice in a single year because the color didn't blend well with community values. Every conversation revealed the same truth. This wasn't an association anymore. It was a private fiefdom, and Nancy was its queen. But like all rulers who overstep, she was about to forget that the law answers to no crown. When the next violation arrived, non-approved fencing design, I didn't react. I let them believe I was ignoring them, that their tactics were working. That's how you study your opponent best, when they think you're powerless. That night, floodlights suddenly blazed across from my property. The HOA had installed them without warning, tall and blinding, aimed directly into my living room windows. Max barked endlessly at the harsh glow, tail low, uneasy. Felt like a siege. I stood there, watching the white light bleach my porch, and knew they'd crossed from nuisance into harassment. The next morning, I called the county zoning office. A polite, tired clerk on the other end checked the database. "No record of floodlight permits for your subdivision," she said. "Want us to send an inspector?" By that evening, a county truck rolled up. The inspector spent 10 minutes with the maintenance crew, then ordered the lights taken down on the spot. I watched from my porch as the bulbs went dark one by one, the night slowly reclaiming its peace. Across the street, Nancy stood at her porch, frozen, clutching her phone. Our eyes met across the distance. For the first time, she looked uncertain. That was the moment she realized she was playing chess with someone who already knew the next 10 moves. Later that night, I sat in my office surrounded by papers and folders. The soft hum of my desk lamp filled the silence. I was reading through HOA financial statements, each number a clue. Then I saw it. A transfer of $48,000 from the maintenance reserve to the operations account, without a record of homeowner approval. Illegal, plain and simple. I leaned back, a small, deliberate smile forming. This wasn't just about petty fines anymore. This was fraud. For the next few days, I built my case like I would for any trial, calmly, methodically, without anger. Every photograph, every testimony, every receipt had a place in the growing file on my desk. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was preparing to free my entire neighborhood from fear. When the folder grew thick enough to snap its clasp, I decided it was time for a visit. Nancy opened her door before I could knock, expression carved from disdain. "Mr. Carter," she said, her tone brittle. "You're not supposed to be here." "Don't worry," I replied calmly. "I won't be long." She folded her arms. "If this is about your infractions, you'll have a chance to discuss them at our next board meeting." "I know," I said, handing her a sealed envelope. "That's why I'm here. You might want to read that." She glanced down. The heading read, "Notice of Judicial Interest, Evergreen County Court." Her eyes darted up, confusion twisting into realization. You're a lawyer? Not quite. I met her gaze. I'm the judge assigned to your upcoming case with Evergreen County. The silence that followed was electric. Her mouth opened but no words came. She looked at me as if she'd been caught stealing from her own house. I gave her a polite nod. I look forward to seeing you in court, Nancy. Have a pleasant evening. As I turned to leave, Max tugged lightly at his leash, glancing up as if to ask whether the game was finally over. Almost, I whispered, patting his head. The next week, the community hall overflowed for the monthly HOA meeting. Word had spread that something unusual was about to unfold. I arrived quietly, blending into the back row. The air inside buzzed with unease. Neighbors whispered to each other, glancing between me and the board seated at the front. Nancy's voice cut through the chatter. Before we close today's agenda, we must address several false allegations circulating through the community. That was my cue. I stood up slowly, every head turned. Madam President, I said, voice steady. With your permission, I'd like to read a brief statement. Her face stiffened. This is not a forum for grandstanding. I stepped forward, holding the thick folder of evidence. It's not grandstanding when you're presenting truth. The room fell silent. This board has violated multiple state statutes. I continued evenly. You've denied homeowners access to records, issued illegal fines, and misappropriated community funds. These are not allegations. They're documented facts. Copies have already been submitted to the county auditor and the attorney general. Gasps filled the hall. Some neighbors started clapping softly. Others looked at the board with disbelief. Nancy's voice shook. You have no authority here. I looked at her for a long moment before answering quietly. Authority comes from integrity, Nancy. And you lost that the moment you turned community service into personal control. Her face drained of color. I turned to the crowd. You don't have to live in fear. These rules were meant to serve you, not enslave you. And soon, the court will make sure they do exactly that. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then one by one, the neighbors began to clap. Not loud, not frenzied, but steady. A rhythm of gratitude, of relief. I didn't stay for the end of the meeting. I stepped outside into the cool night air, letting the applause fade behind me. The stars were scattered thick across the sky, the forest humming with life again. For the first time since I'd moved here, the neighborhood felt alive. Free. When I reached home, Max bounded onto the porch and sat beside me. I looked out across the tree line where the floodlights had once burned, now replaced by calm darkness. Nancy's house was dark too. No porch light, no movement. I poured a mug of coffee and lifted it toward the quiet sky. Justice, I thought, doesn't always come from anger. Sometimes it arrives softly, like dawn, slow, deliberate, unstoppable. The case would be official in 2 days. The HOA would face every consequence they'd earned. But that night, I wasn't thinking about verdicts or laws. I was thinking about peace, the kind that comes only after standing up, the kind that can't be bought or enforced. Max rested his head against my knee. I smiled. We did all right, boy. Because real justice isn't about punishing the guilty. It's about freeing the good. And I had every intention of doing both. The courtroom smelled faintly of polished wood and paper. A scent I'd grown so used to it almost felt like home. Morning light streamed through tall windows, scattering across the judge's bench. The murmurs of the crowd swelled, fading into a hush as I entered from the side door in my black robe. My steps were measured, deliberate, every sound echoing off marble floors. This wasn't just another case on the docket. It was the moment everything had been leading to, the test of whether truth could still outshine pride. When I took my seat, I scanned the faces in the room. Neighbors from Brookfield filled the benches, their eyes bright with nervous hope. At the defense table sat the HOA board, stiff in their suits, led by Nancy, whose once perfect confidence had cracked into something brittle and uncertain. Her hands fidgeted with her papers. She didn't dare look at me directly. The clerk called the case. Brookfield Homeowners Association versus County of Evergreen. Allegations. violation of fiduciary duty, misuse of funds, unlawful enforcement practices, and civil harassment. The words fell heavy, echoing through the chamber like thunder before a storm. The Attorney General's representative rose first, laying out evidence piece by piece. Photos of illegal notices, copies of denied records, bank statements showing unauthorized transfers. Each page turned like a hammer striking the nail of truth. Nancy's attorney tried to object, but his words stumbled against facts too solid to move. My clients acted within the spirit of community harmony, he said. The prosecutor's voice cut through smoothly. Harmony isn't built by fear, it's built by fairness. And this board forgot the difference. As testimony rolled on, I kept my expression neutral, but inside, every story weighed on me. The old couple who couldn't afford their medication because of constant fines. The single mother whose child cried each night after their bicycle was taken. Ordinary people bullied under the banner of order. By noon, the tension had grown so thick it was almost visible. The gallery's silence felt electric. When it was time for closing statements, Nancy rose to speak on her own behalf. Your Honor, she began, voice trembling. I only wanted to maintain the beauty and discipline of our neighborhood. People don't understand how difficult it is to manage hundreds of homes, to keep things perfect. Her words faltered as she met my eyes. For the first time, I saw not arrogance but exhaustion. A person trapped by her own need for control. I leaned forward slightly. Mrs. Haynes, maintaining beauty is admirable, but enforcing fear is not management. It's domination. And communities aren't gardens to be pruned. They're people to be respected. She said nothing. Her shoulders sank. The courtroom was silent but for the faint hum of the ceiling fan. After deliberation, I read the verdict. My voice was calm, every syllable clear. This court finds the Brookfield Homeowners Association in violation of state statutes governing fiduciary duty, financial transparency, and due process. Effective immediately, the current board is dissolved pending reorganization under county oversight. Fines issued illegally will be refunded. Community governance will be rebuilt by vote. Gasps filled the room, followed by a wave of relieved whispers. A tearful man in the back clasped his wife's hand. A young mother hugged her child. Even the clerk paused, a small smile crossing his face before regaining composure. Nancy sat still, as if the world had stopped turning. She didn't protest. She just nodded once, slow, almost imperceptible. Perhaps, in that moment, she realized the real punishment wasn't the ruling. It was the truth she could no longer hide behind. When I adjourned court, the sound of the gavel echoed like a promise. Justice wasn't loud, but it was final. Outside, the day was bright, the kind of blue that feels like a fresh page. As I walked down the courthouse steps, neighbors from Brookfield gathered, their gratitude tangible in every nod, every quiet thank you. I wasn't there as a hero, just as a man who'd refused to bow to intimidation. Judge Carter, one elderly woman called out, "What happens now?" "Now," I said gently, "you build the kind of neighborhood you all deserve, one where rules protect, not punish." Her eyes shimmered with relief. "We will." That evening, back home, the sun dipped low over the treeline, painting everything in gold. The air felt different, lighter, freer. Mailboxes no longer carried threats, and front yards echoed with laughter instead of whispers. The same people who once avoided each other now stopped to talk, their words easy, their smiles real. I sat on my porch with Max lying at my feet, his tail sweeping the wooden boards in slow rhythm. The sound of children playing drifted from down the street. Somewhere, someone strummed a guitar. For the first time, Brookfield felt like the community it was always meant to be. Across the street, Nancy's house stood quiet. A for sale sign leaned in the yard, swaying softly in the breeze. I didn't feel triumph, only peace. She'd get her second chance somewhere else, maybe to learn that control is a fragile illusion, and respect, once lost, is the hardest thing to reclaim. I took a sip of coffee, letting its warmth settle. Max lifted his head, ears twitching as a car passed. "It's over," I murmured. "We did what we came here to do." But deep down, I knew justice never really ends. It just moves from one story to another, one life to the next. A faint wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and something new hope. That night, I wrote a short note and pinned it to the corkboard where the HOA violations once hung. It read, "Never let anyone convince you that doing what's right is trespassing, because truth doesn't need permission." As I turned off the porch light, I thought about everyone watching, reading, listening. Those who've faced unfairness, been silenced, or told to stay quiet to keep peace. Here's what I want them to know. When injustice knocks, don't back down. Learn your rights, use your voice, and stand tall, even if you stand alone. Because somewhere, someone else is waiting for the courage you show to find their own. Stand firm. Speak truth. Be the change that restores balance. And if you ever think one person can't make a difference, remember a quiet judge, a loyal dog, and a small neighborhood that found its freedom again.